Community Motors West Side, the GM Superstore next to Cinema West. Community Motors of Mason City, we give you more.
Let's move on to council and see if the council has any remaining questions based on what we've seen tonight. Council, questions, comments? Mr. Hickey.
Most of my questions I'm going to direct to Mr. Phelps. The emission standards from a facility like this would be regulated according to federal EPA standards, I assume.
Correct.
And if CES doesn't meet those standards, what happens then?
Take, for example, let's just take the nitrogen oxide standard that they'd have to meet. If they did their tests and they were not meeting that standard, they would have to figure out why. They would not, we never require anybody to shut down immediately. They investigate that. Typically what happens when we have a failure, there's adjustments that can be made. They would retest. I would say most often then the problem is corrected. But ultimately, if they are not able to meet that, they would either have to add additional control or they would simply not be allowed to operate.
Okay. One of the things I've heard a lot about is this new technology. And when I was at the landfill meeting on Thursday, I think you brought up 10 years ago that ethanol plants was a new technology. And now we got 52 of them, if I remember right. I know that there's new technologies out there. And we got an ethanol plant, we got a soy diesel plant, we got AGP, and all of them have emissions. And I think you said that there is some emissions that come off of anything in the smokestack, so to speak. But again, that would be regulated through the DNR. And I'm sure there's other communities looking at facilities like this. But again, everything that CES would have to do, they would be independently tested, and then that results would go to you as public record. And if they don't hit the standards, they would, again, you would put stringent things on them, or they wouldn't be able to operate, if I'm understanding correctly.
That's accurate.
Okay. Well, one thing I've noticed, and I've attended 2 different landfill meetings, been to different meetings where I've seen these presentations with these guys, and I've been very impressed. I want to thank you guys for coming to Mason City, opening up to this community, trying to possibly bring this project here with a $30 million plus investment, 50 jobs, so speaking of $2 million payroll to go with that. So we're no different than any other community. We have our issues, and we're a good community, but I think I'm comfortable with the process. Now, the one thing I've seen on the process is you guys brought it up earlier. You said there's 5 steps. I see it as 6 steps. One, we have the city, and we have to do the tax abatement, which we've already said we're going to work with you folks on. ZBA, which has to make sure that this would be a conditional use permit and be zoned appropriately, which I think is there. They just maybe need to get the information in place to get that. Now, as one of my fellow colleagues has here, I've noticed through this process it's become fairly convoluted, as Max would say typically. People are kind of taking their step of the process and maybe trying to get into the other person's part of the process. Even with our landfill, and I think you guys do a great job out there, but when I attended that meeting the other night, part of that discussion that was brought in place was how this is going to affect Mason City. Well, that's kind of our role up here, is how that's going to work. The way I look at it for the landfill's role, and no disrespect to anybody, so don't take this wrong, is your role is how this is going to affect the landfill of North Iowa. And when I look at it from where I'm sitting, and I'm not telling you on the landfill how to vote or what to do, but you gotta look at this, how this is gonna affect you long term. Now, when I look at it as this process could possibly increase the life of the landfill. It's gonna take additional garbage out of your waste stream. And now the $5 tipping fee has been taken away, so you're still gonna get the same revenue. To me, it's almost a no-brainer at this point, because you're gonna extend the life of the landfill. And you're also gonna take some of that stuff that's getting into the landfill, and they're gonna recycle it back out. So we're gonna save on that waste stream as well.
Okay, Mr. Hickey, can we come back here when we get back to the next round? Cool, thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, Mayor.
Mr. Weaver.
You know, tonight's meeting's been great and everything, appreciate everybody coming, but it really lends itself to even more questions now. I appreciate the fact that you guys are willing to take components from all over the country or even the world and assemble it, kind of like a nutty professor, and hope that it works and recoups your $35 million investment and doesn't impact the community. Mr. Fossberger, how many years did you spend at Lockheed? How many years did you spend at Lockheed?
I was in Lockheed for a year.
For how long?
1 year.
1 year. Mr. Jaworski, how long were you at Lockheed?
I was there
15. The familiarity that Mr. Fossberger brings and that you have in my research, it's kind of a, you know, you've been doing this quite a while and you haven't been able to land one of these projects. I understand you've given a couple presentations to other landfills in Iowa. You've approached a couple others?
No, we have
None? All right. Well, anyway, I know that just a week ago or so, a group of citizens went to Mr. Trout, who made the decision to bring Mr. Fossberger in. And they wanted to bring somebody in that, from their side, their point of view. I always like that. Let's get everybody's point of view. So I hope we have another town hall meeting with someone else being represented here besides the familiarity with the Department of Energy, and Mr. Jaworski and Mr. Flores. I hope that you do that too, Brent. You know, here's the deal. This is what I don't like. I was there when they locked the gate in 1971 or 72. I was a hauler. Back then I had my own little trash route. And it really put us in a lurch. And but what the good works were done by the 2080 agreement that also the state of Iowa lets you do is we put a landfill together out in a secluded area in the county. I just don't like the fact that you're bringing the landfill back in our city limits. Doesn't belong here. Matter of fact, we don't have permitting for waste transfer anywhere in the city. We don't have that type of zoning. That's why you have to go to ZBA to make a special, and that's why it should be difficult, it should be studied. The other thing I want to say is some people talked about what's your liability and how's that going to work. Well, Mr. Flores, you're on tape, you're on film. You can see it where you told us what your liability is at the end of your speech out in the landfill. You said you're a limited liability corporation. Hey, that's it. We're gone. You're gone. We're done. Everything's done. You just got an empty building sitting on the horizon. That's what you said. If you had to get out of here. That's correct, right?
Yeah, that's
I'm not making this stuff up.
The risk is on our shoulders.
Well, yeah, but then, no, you just walked, you told us. You said you can just leave. I don't appreciate that, but there's just so many things here we need to ask about. Your financials, I asked Brent Trout. We've done many development agreements and we've gotten into people's financials. Brent said, that's a great idea, man. She came right up to me. Brent said, yeah, we should look into that. I said, let's get it done on Brad Street, see what's going on here. There's nothing like that happening here. We're not going to look into that. We're just taking your word for it that you guys are good for it and what's going to happen. Now, I just don't like the fact that the net impact of jobs, and this is what's all coming down to, the Larry Elwoods and the Vicki Snyders and the North Iowa Corridor, Brent Willett. It's jobs, 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 and I understand that. But quite frankly, there could be a net impact on jobs here. I've talked to the haulers, I've talked to our recyclers, and you know it's a concern too, and our landfill. We could literally lose 25 jobs easy, maybe more, maybe 35, while you're creating 53. That's not going to leave, really, and when I look at the salaries being paid already to these, and you're replacing 22, 23, 25 of these jobs at $12 an hour, we just signed a contract at the landfill. They're making 24, 25, 26 bucks an hour working on that hill. And I just don't see where that adds up for jobs. That's what your focus really is. That's what the issue is here, Mr. Jaworski. I appreciate everything you're doing and all the research you're doing and the studying and trying to bring something better to our country, but we don't have a problem. We have a $35 million investment out of the North Iowa landfill. It works beautiful. Somebody said it's a burden. It's not a burden. The landfill's not a burden. It works beautifully. We're all into it. We're sitting on a pile of money. And if we do this project, guess what? We're already starting to do, for all of you that asked about methane tonight, we're trying to do methane. But we're waiting on a line, we're waiting on some other things, and it's gonna take some money, but we're gonna tap into that. If we do this, that's done. We don't have that opportunity anymore. We're trying to do the good things out there. So I'm just, the true and tried thing is
Max, you're gonna kill another one.
and,
Hey, that's enough of the gallery. Thank you.
you only gotta worry about it a month and a half more, buddy. Anyway, no, I'm no offense to you, but I'm just saying, we have a good system that works here with our landfill. There's no problem. We're all invested in it. We do great recycling, and you know what I'm talking about. And I'm just not in favor of it. I don't think, like you said, it's not a good fit for us here. You've been trying to get it running. It's not a fit for you elsewhere. It's not a good fit for us. I don't see that. I'm real worried about the loss of jobs, actually, the jobs that are created. And those 25 jobs that you're going to create, sorting, I know none of our children are going to do that job. Nobody may say he's going to do that job. Where I have
Mr.
a
Weaver,
uniform.
thank you.
Do I have
very
16
kindly.
seconds?
Thank you very
I have
kindly.
16, 18.
Well, that's the problem with your math. It's counting the other way. So.
Sorry.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. Norquist, Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't think landfills exist to create jobs. I don't think landfills exist to generate revenue in a community. Landfills exist because as people, we generate trash and we got a problem we got to get rid of. But nobody will question the integrity of the landfill. We have a top-notch landfill in North Iowa, and there has been an attempt to make this be about the landfill. It's not about the landfill. It's about an opportunity to maybe do something a little bit different and maybe benefit the community at the same time. If this project's going to fail, I think it should fail for one of two reasons. Either these folks can't get their financing and understand there's no Mason City taxpayer money at risk. Either they can't get their financing or they can't get their permits from the DNR. And quite honestly, if they can't get their permits from the DNR, I don't want them here. One of the telling comments that I heard made last week at the meeting out to the landfill was the gentleman from the DNR commented that the DNR manages their permitting per EPA requirements, federal regulations, and in fact, those federal guidelines are not geared towards the average person walking down the street, those of us here in this room. Those guidelines are established to meet what was defined as people at risk. Kids, we talk a lot about kids, and people with asthma. I believe that's exactly what you said last week. And so the standards that exist right now are not for the average person. They've already been benchmarked against people that are at risk. And they have to meet that standard to be able to go into production. Now, I read the report that we went through tonight. We glossed through quite a bit of it pretty quick. But my recollection reading that report was the emissions that you're forecasting at this point in the process are significantly lower than what the EPA has established as standards. And all that's going to be proven out through the process. There's been the concern raised, well, what if the EPA raises their standards several years down the road, their grandfather? Well, first of all, I would suspect that what you're forecasting right now is enough below the EPA guidelines that even if the EPA guidelines are amended, they'd still be below them. But in the event that they're not, I think there is some wisdom that came up from one of the gentlemen that spoke. Maybe we should look into building into the development agreement, if revised standards are made, a mechanism by which we address that. This is still very much a process. We're still at maybe step 2 of 6 or whatever. We still have to go back to ZBA. It's got to go to the landfill, then it's got to go to the DNR. But again, every meeting that I have and every question that I've heard asked, I've heard answered in a manner that makes me more comfortable with the project as opposed to less comfortable with the project. Now, the other thing that I learned visiting with the gentleman last week from the DNR is at the point in time that they are ready to issue a permit on the process, we can call for a public hearing on that permit. I think that would be very wise for us to do as a community because right now, everything is a guesstimate based on technology and information that's been supplied. At the point that they're actually ready to issue a permit, they've got hard data. And I think that's the point in time that we should have another public hearing and create another opportunity for questions specific to the permit. But I haven't heard anything yet that gives me pause. I live in Mason City and I'm breathing the same air everybody else here is breathing. I have a wife in Mason City. I have kids in Mason City. I'm not concerned, I'm not overly concerned with anything that I've heard up to this point. This is getting flushed out more publicly than any project that we've ever brought to town. I'm more concerned about what's coming out the stacks that we've never run through this ringer. This is going to have a lot of checks and balances in the process. Now, in the minute that I have left with respect to economic development, it's funny how in the last half hour of public questions, we turned this into wanting to kill the project because of emissions to wanting to kill it because we've turned our trash into a commodity. Well, look, that's not how economic development works. These were the first ones to come to Mason City and try to do a creative project. When Sunny Fresh came to town, we didn't stop and say, hey, you know what, we got an egg processor interested in Mason City, let's put this on hold and see who else might want to come and get the best deal. We never did that for Kraft. That's not the way economic development works. And the first time we try that will be the last time, because that's the quickest way to guarantee everybody crosses Mason City off the list before they ever even give us a first look, let alone a second look. It just doesn't work that way. The reason this is working is because these folks have been able to secure private financing and put together a deal that does not put the taxpayers of Mason City at risk financially. And we get to add jobs and extend the life of the landfill. As long as we can get permits, I'm comfortable.
Here we are. Ms. Silver.
Again, I'd like to thank you so much. I don't think my mic is working. Thank you so much for everything that you've come and presented to us here this evening. And a few years back, this council had decided we were going to get a biodiesel plant in town, and it happened to be in my neighborhood. They chose not to put it out where you're potentially looking to put your plant. They chose to put it in city limits by my house. This room was packed, standing room only. Very concerned citizens. What about the extra railroad traffic? What about the smells? What about the noise? Everything that's coming up here with this today. Did we get a biodiesel plant? Absolutely. Was it in my backyard? Absolutely. Did it make noise? No. Did it smell? No. Did it, it may have been closed, that's beside the point. That's beside the point. But, you know, bottom line is this council chose to put it in and it worked. The product that they brought to the table here for us, it didn't smell, you know, anything like that. But were there any other biodiesel plants around us? Absolutely not. Hartford, Connecticut Courier came to town and interviewed me, asked how I felt about the biodiesel plant in my backyard because they were going to put one out there. And I had no problems with it. Did I have problems when I came here and talked at the podium? Yes. Did I get cut off after 3 minutes of talking? Yes. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for upping that to 5 minutes. I really appreciate that. You know, I have one question. Every other question's been brought up here, so I'm not going to bring it up again. Are you comfortable with what's being presented here to us? I'm seeing yes. Yep. You know, I guess that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silver.
Is there a rebuttal, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, we're gonna do a 3-minute round here, so I'm gonna assume you'd like to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, I just
That's
want to,
good.
right, you know, this is a community that spent $22 million taking the radium out of its water. We've spent more time discussing whether or not we want a vicious dog rule. You know, this is au contraire, going pretty fast, and I know how politics works. But I do want to say this of the conditional uses on the ZBA that's going to be December 6th. Number 2, the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of the other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood. Well, we've determined that this is not permitted in any of our zoning districts. Here's staff's answer. It is the opinion of staff that there is not enough information available at this time to make a judgment on whether or not the application meets the criteria regarding potential impacts to or diminished values of properties in the immediate vicinity of the facility, since the operational impacts of the facility are not fully known. And they're not going to be known until the building is built. We're not going to know what comes out of those stacks until the building is built. And that's just a little too late for some of the people. We've had some citizens talk about property values already with what's existing. I spoke years ago about not wanting to do a industrial park on the south side of Mason City. We've surrounded our community with industrial parks is what we've done. Our forefathers and foremothers put everything on the north side of town, and that was smart. That was good thinking. Big buffer till another community 10 miles away, or 107. So I don't think nothing's going to change here. There's nothing that you're going to be able to bring here to the table that's going to say that you can guarantee that property values won't go down. If they can't have all 5 criteria met in the positive, ZBA commissioners can't pass this. It doesn't pass it. So I don't know what's going to change. There's nothing here being brought up. There's nothing here that's going to change it. I would doubt if Mr. Yarborski in Lake Superior, Colorado would want this within a mile of your home. Or you, Mr. Fossberg, or anybody, Scott, or anybody else, we decide to put it out in Asbury on the Old Town dump. You know, that's just common sense. People just don't want it. We don't get hung up on in my backyard. It just makes common sense. So I don't know how it's going to pass the ZBA number 2 here. They didn't have enough information then, and they're not going to have any other information at that meeting December 6th. I'll tell you what's going to have to happen. Certain politicians are going to have to show up in their office and going to demand changes be made. I think they barely got by to number 1, and I think that might have happened in that case from what I understand. So I just don't know how it's going to happen. It's going to have to become a political thing. Well, I wish it wouldn't become a political thing. Let's really truly look at the job situation of it and the net gain or impact what it's going to have in the industry. You probably should bring in all the haulers and the recyclers and the landfill and say what's going to happen to these jobs that we have already compared to the 53 we're going to get. Is it worth tearing our community up over? I mean, good luck to you. I mean, you say, what's that town you're going to put one in April of next year? In Wisconsin or Colorado? You mentioned Mr. Yarborski. You said
No, I did not say we were putting one in April next year. What I said was Colorado was looking to pass regulations to make it tier 1, so that Hunter, Colorado would be a one that we would start in April.
All right, thank you, Mr. Newman. All right, anybody else on response? Mr.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Ms. Solberg? All right, before we move there, I'm just curious, Ms. Fossberg, do you have any issue with anything you've heard here tonight?
No, it's been very informative, thank you.
DNR, anything you want to correct?
No, but I'll leave these 4 copies of the regs up here if anybody's interested.
Okay. I need to see, folks, do you have any summation or anything you just want to add real quick, and we'll give you a free shot here. Folks, as you exit, you're more than welcome to do so. Just be quiet, give them a chance to speak.
Just 2 things. One was brought in, if we fail,
Quiet in the gallery, please.
Mason City is left to hang. The reality is IRG, who is our risk insurance, will have an agreement setting with Mason City so that if something happened that we failed, catastrophic failure, Mason City is covered under that indemnity clause with any cleanup. And IRG is a $1 billion company. They do environmental cleanup. They do everything else. That's going to be in the contract. So, and we already have that slated in our financial model for that insurance. So if something goes and happens, the indemnifier on that is Mason City, it's not us. So that is already taken care of in insurance budget. The other thing that people, and they're still, this is going to be including dioxin and all that. One thing that I will let you know is on Friday we find out if we win putting a waste to energy plant in Antarctica. And the reason that's important is Antarctica is a 0 footprint environmental zone. It's run by an international organization, it's a group of them, the United States is one of them, and National Science Foundation runs that contract. If that contract goes to Lockheed, we are discriminating technology for Lockheed. There will be a 1.25 megawatt waste energy plant down in Antarctica. So it's gone to their concerns for 0 footprint impact. So when I'm talking and have confidence, I have confidence on my stuff, but I have confidence that National Science Foundation, which has looked at the Lockheed proposal, also has confidence. So, and thanks everyone, shoot, we started at 7, and you've given me 3.5 hours of your time.
Well, we thank you for coming in and for answering and communicating and disseminating the information to our public. As you can see, they're an interested public, and that's very helpful. It's very good. We thank Mr. Fossbender, PE, for coming in. Very much appreciated. And of course, we thank our own DNR gentlemen, Mr. Dave Phelps and Mr. John Curtin. We very much appreciate it. And thank you. Thank you, public, for coming in. Thank you for watching. We're adjourned.